A legendary weekend in the Lou. PGA Tour champions compete in the Stifel Charity Classic, presented by Compliance Solutions, September 4th through 7th, and COAR. Perform live with your Friday ticket. Visit StifelCharityClassic.com today.
Welcome, everyone, to the Card Central Postgame Show here on STL Sports Central. All content provided by DraftKings. The crown is yours. He's Brenden Schaeffer, and I am Stefan Caray. We are excited after the Cardinals took Game 2 against the Marlins. A very good offensive performance, a very good relief pitching performance. 15 runs for the first 2 games of this series. Down south, wow. The narrative has flipped completely from the end of the last homestand.
Yes, it most certainly has, Stefan, and it's unfortunate because it feels like the Cardinals left a lot of meat on the bone when it comes to the way that homestand ended, didn't take advantage of the Rockies, let every single game of the Yankees series slip away, which built the big, giant, vast hole in the standings that the Cardinals are now slowly trying to claw their way back out of, and a couple of wins in Miami. Now you certainly are going to go for the sweep. You'll want to anyway. And we'll see if the Cardinals can complete that tomorrow. But you do really have to feel good about I think, Stefan, the plate approach. The way the at-bats have gone about it the last 2 nights has been consistent. It's been relentless, and it's been really what we know this offense to be capable of doing when at its best.
Yeah, something I'm looking at just at the box score here. 12 hits for the Cardinals, but the run distribution is what interests me the most. You score 4 through the first 3 innings of the game, but then they score 3 from the 5th inning on. That's something that we've seen a problem for this team to be able to do is continue to add on late in the game. Marlins score 2 in the bottom of the 4th. Guess what? The Cardinals get those 2 runs right back in the top of the 5th. Marlins score 2 more in the bottom of the 6th. Well, the Cardinals add another in the 7th. It's that cat and mouse game, making the other team play 1 step forward, 2 steps back, that really seems to frustrate teams like the Marlins and has frustrated the Cardinals when they've been on the receiving end.
Oh, there's no doubt about that. It sucks when you're on the other side of it, but the Cardinals able to kind of take it to a team like that. 12 hits tonight. They had a bunch of them yesterday. You mentioned the 15 runs. I love seeing it from different spots of the batting order as well. You had a couple of guys with overs tonight, but Gorman, for example, he didn't get a hit, but 2 walks, able to continue getting on base, which has been a nice trend for him recently. You see Nathan Church score a run despite not having a hit in the game, but then the multi-hit games from Nootbaar, Herrera, Contreras, and how about Thomas Saggese with a 3 for 4? Those are the types of nights we want to see for the Cardinal bats. And look, I know it's the Marlins, and so we can kind of, poo-poo the opponent a little bit. Couple of things with that. One, you play the games you play. Heck, the Rockies series should have been real easy for the Cardinals, right, in theory, and it was not. But the other part about the Marlins is it's the Cardinal offense that's doing a really nice job in this series, and I would argue the Marlins are lining up a pretty capable, potent starting pitching rotation against St. Louis in this series. Yuri Perez yesterday, he's a young pitcher. He's maybe inexperienced and hasn't come into his own yet, but we know the stuff is fantastic. The Cardinals whittled away at him until he sort of broke down yesterday and the floodgates opened. And tonight it's a similar story against Cabrera. 2 really good arms, and it's Sandy tomorrow. I'm impressed by what the Cardinals are doing. You can look at the logo if you want, Marlins, but I think the pitching that they are facing and having success against is actually a really good mark in their favor.
Yeah, I agree with you completely. And again, this is not the Marlins team that we're used to seeing. This is not the lovable loser Marlins. Hey, you're going to roll into town. You're going to take 2 out of 3 regardless and maybe get a chance to sweep. They're a much better team, a much better constructed team, a very well-managed team, a well-coached team. So give credit where it's due. This is impressive for a team like the Cardinals, as the roster is currently constructed, to take 2 out of 3 from and to score as much as they have, as you previously mentioned. Now, you bring up Thomas Saggese tonight. 3 hits, had a sac fly as well. Maybe not the extra base type of guy that you're expecting or wanting him to be. But if you could get 3 singles a night, I mean, that's pretty good. And Saggese's bat has started to heat up in the month of August.
You're certainly going to take that. I really wonder what the 23-year-old is going to become at the big league level, because right now it's not a batting line that jumps off the page by any means. He's hitting 259, which, heck, that is above league average, but you want to see, I think, from him a more consistent development to that plate approach beyond being able to get you the hits. The 288 on base percentage, that's got to go up relative to the average. So you want to see him taking more walks. And the 628 OPS tells you, like you mentioned, Stefan, not a ton of power from Thomas Saggese at this juncture just yet, but you're starting to see him maybe turn a little bit of a corner with some multi-hit games recently. And that's one of those things that's difficult, because it is something we talk about with other players like a Nolan Gorman. It comes with time, right? When you get opportunity in the lineup on a day in, day out basis, you're going to be able to maximize more what you're all about as a hitter. And for Saggese, he's kind of been at times on the outside looking in of that, because there have been other players the Cardinals look to prioritize. But for the time being, with Nolan Arenado remaining on the injured list, Saggese continues to get a decent amount of looks, and it seems as though he is starting to do a little bit more with those looks, which you like to see.
Well, he handles the bat very, very well. Now, some of the younger guys that have made it up from AAA are already paying dividends. Matt Swanson has been tremendous, almost had an immaculate inning tonight in his inning of work. He is really, really looking like one of the major bright spots of the season, with a small sample size, I will say, but he has looked very good in that back end of the bullpen. Riley O'Brien, despite a little bit of traffic, looked good, and Jojo Romero looked great. This is something that I think you ask the question about, right? You trade away a couple of your really important back end of the bullpen relievers. How were the young guys going to respond? Well, they've been one of the best relief corps in baseball since the All-Star break.
Yeah, and it's been, largely the development of guys like Matt Swanson, who I'm convinced it's kind of like the chicken or the egg. A lot of times you want to see the reliever take steps to show you that he can be a late inning weapon for you, and then you give him the role. In this case, it almost happens in reverse, where the role is bestowed upon guys like Matt Swanson, like Riley O'Brien, before they necessarily tick every check mark, every box to know that, hey, once you throw them into the fire, they're going to be ready. It was just by necessity because of the way the Cardinals had to approach that deadline. But I've been impressed with the way we've seen the guys come out on the other side of it. Tonight, I felt like with Riley, you got a little bit of a glimpse into some of the issues he's had in the past when it comes to the walks. Two straight batters in the ninth inning, throws a ton of balls and gets himself into a little bit of hot water. But then you see the really good bounce back, the stuff to go with it. I want to see more of that from both Swanson and O'Reilly down the stretch, Riley O'Brien down the stretch, to be able to get an idea. Where do they fit into next year's bullpen? Where do they fit into a bullpen in a year where you intend to be competitive? You intend to make the playoffs. That, to me, is going to be really interesting to follow. And so far, so good for both of those guys.
Yeah, and you had to face Troy Johnston at the bottom of that order, who, again, maybe hasn't quite hit for power at the major league level. But just a season and a half ago, he was the Marlins organizational home run leader. So that guy has plenty of power from the left side. Then to see Riley O'Brien work out of traffic with the tying run at the plate was impressive to see. The Cardinals 5 games out of that final wild card spot. The Mets did win tonight 8-1. We are awaiting how the Reds will play against the Angels. So just a little update there. And while we have everybody, make sure to like and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Get involved in the conversation, as many of you have. We're trying to get all of you involved every single time we do a show. SEC football season coming around the corner, and Brendan's got plenty of coverage. So you want to see that smiling face as much as possible.
You do with a lot of the Mizzou talk and some different stuff we're going to be doing. Aaron is our favorite contrarian here in the comments section, so he's making fun of us for bringing up the wild card. And, I'm with it. It's a number to know, but it's kind of back of mind for me until the Cardinals get to 500. But as they start to claw back and get to above, yeah, it's at least worth throwing out there, because as it's mentioned, there's not necessarily a ton of teams that the Cardinals are going to have to hop over. But yeah, I hear you in the comments section. I'm not believing that this team is necessarily destined to go on a wild card run either. But, we do talk about all angles of the Cardinals. And, it would just be nice that when they have these winning moments, if they could keep it sustained rather than, my gosh, play great against the Dodgers and Cubs and then fumble the Rockies. You're looking to stop fumbling. And look, if they found a way to go on a sustained run, you never know. It's just very difficult to believe or to think in those terms right now, especially with some of the injuries they've dealt with. And this comes in from Mason Windu. About 35 games left. Do we think we see Donnie again this year? My guess with that, Stefan, obviously, they're on the road right now, and it's a little bit difficult to tell what went awry in terms of Donovan over the weekend. we're hoping, and then you have to just say put him on the shelf. But if they waited it out for 3 days and played short all weekend against the Yankees, I would have to believe that it shouldn't be a month-long ordeal for Donovan, but I guess we can't really know for sure.
No doubt about it. And I think if you ask Brenden Donovan, the answer to that is a solid, firm yes. I am going to be back. I'm going to be playing baseball as soon as humanly possible. But again, only time will tell how things play out for him and for the rest of the Cardinals. Now, you're playing in the state of Florida. You've got the Marlins who are embattled. You've got the Rays who are embattled. This is a huge road trip opportunity before you head back home to Busch Stadium. I mean, again, I know that people are looking at that wild card as, hey, there's no chance, there's no possibility, 35 games left. But the Mets have not played good baseball. The Reds have, but the Mets certainly have not. And I'm not saying it's impossible. I'm not saying it is possible. But as Adam says here, playoff bound, I think as soon as you start thinking of yourselves in the same breath as the Marlins, as the Pirates, as the Rockies, that's when things really begin to spiral, because organizationally, this whole team's culture is going to shift. There's no guarantee they're going to be a phenomenal team in 2026. It might be another retool year, figuring out who you have. So while we can still hold out hope that maybe they make a push late with this young, energetic, refreshed group, I'm going to continue to hold out hope that they will.
I'd like to see him go on a run. It's been 2 steps forward and really not a different number of steps back. It's just 2 steps back. They're right around 500. It's like a magnet for them recently. But I do think we see Donovan back because, again, unless something crazy happened with his injury that we're unaware of, it seemed as though he was close. This I wonder about, though, from Graham. Do we see Arenado? Now, he was at the stadium tonight. They showed him on the broadcast talking about maybe taking a little bit more time than initially they had hoped in terms of strengthen the shoulder, get back to action. Met with team doctors, the whole bit. What do we think's going on with that situation? Because to me, I do not think it is as much of a guarantee that we see Arenado, Stefan, especially if there's any question about health and knowing the impetus to continue seeing guys like Nolan Gorman and Thomas Saggese. Do you think we see Arenado again this year? I would lean yes, but I don't think I'm firm in that.
Yeah, no, I don't think we are going to see Arenado, because I think that especially down the stretch, if you look at what they've tried to do, what they've made apparent is they're going to let their young guys play. Why haven't you seen Jose Fermin going in there and playing? Why haven't you seen the more experienced players getting reps? Well, you want to see Gorman at third. You want to see Saggese as much as you can. Again, Donovan being out helps with that. But, I don't know. It really depends. Is Arenado going to get healthy? How fast is he going to get healthy? Personally, from a defensive standpoint, it's night and day. Third base with him in the game versus Gorman at third base. It is a very, very different culture on that diamond. But that is above my pay grade. I'm not entirely sure how they're going to address that situation. But as somebody who's really appreciated Nolan Arenado and what he's been able to do for this organization and who he is as a person off the field, I hope he does make it back. Maybe it's his last hurrah with the Cardinals.
Yeah, I have to wonder about that, because if 2026 is not necessarily the year, and we've talked about this, I talked about it with Rocchio this morning on the Randy Carricker show. If 2026 is not the year where, the spending goes way up and it's all in to try to win, if it's still kind of I framed it this way. If this is kind of the runway year, next year ought to be the year where you install. It's the installation of what you want the future to be. You've decided, you've seen it all, and then you have to choose which players are you going to roll with into the next iteration of Cardinal baseball. And because of the contract for Arenado, which expires after 2 more seasons, I just don't feel like there's a long-term angle there with him. The numbers have declined precipitously offensively, and so I don't know what the trade value would be. I do not know the appetite to eat money on a situation like that, but I would think that when you've got Nolan Gorman, who is starting to improve at the plate and has been much more consistent, it's clear that pitchers are afraid of him again because he's taken his walks. They're not always in the zone right now against Nolan Gorman, and that's because they know what he can do to them when they are in the zone against him. He can hit the ball over the fence. So you're starting to see that really tick up in a positive way. Does that mean you trade Nolan Gorman because he's got value again, or does that mean you build around him and allow him to be that third baseman next year? And then there's the J.J. Weatherholt part of it all, where I mean, it'd be nice to get a look at him down the stretch as well, but we've understood there to be a glut, whether that's in the starting lineup because there's got to be somewhere to play him, or in the 40-man roster situation, as we've talked about a lot on here on STL Sports Central. Whatever the case may be with that, you eventually have to say, what is this Nolan Arenado situation, and is it worth continuing to have guys that are blocked who could be here beyond 2027, whereas I just don't really see that playing out with Nolan. So how do they approach it? I'm not saying there's you used the phrase above my pay grade. I don't know the exact answer as to how they approach it, because this is a future Hall of Fame type of player you're still talking about, who, if he hadn't had the injuries, I think would win the Gold Glove this year. He's been that good defensively. But the offense has gone down, and you do have guys that are knocking on the door in this sort of retool environment.
Yeah, and to me, it feels like at least during the trade deadline and during the offseason, you've seen teams prioritizing glove first third baseman, right? Matt Chapman gets a huge payday. I know he can hit and he has some power, but certainly isn't hitting for average in the way that, say, Chipper Jones would have, or an Austin Riley type, if we're sticking with the Atlanta theme, or even what Nolan Arenado has been able to do, at least through the first couple of years of his St. Louis contract. Ryan McMahon goes and gets picked up by the Yankees. I have to think that if that glove gets a little bit better for Gorman, there will be a lot of opportunity and a lot of suitors that would like that left-handed power in the middle of their order.
Yeah, and then maybe that just clears the way for, at some point, J.J. Weatherholt, whether it's at the beginning of next season, whatever the case might be there, if he's your third baseman and Donovan is entrenched at second at that point, and again, we can do the hypothetical every which way. I don't think that's us assigning like, oh, here's what I hope happens. We just have to recognize there's probably 5 to 6 to 7 different iterations. It's a fork in the road with a lot of sporks, and you got to figure out, which way are we going to see the Cardinals go with this? But in that iteration, yeah, if Gorman is moved because he has value and Arenado is moved to try to find him a contender where the Cardinals are just not ready to go all in next year, Weatherholt at third, Donovan at second, maybe that solves your riddle with a guy like Sajacy, who I still want to see more of down this stretch, but maybe he's a guy that plugs in 3 days a week at a variety of positions across your infield rather than somebody you give an everyday role to. There's room in the league for guys like that. And again, Sajacy at only 23, I hate to assign him as more of a utility part-time player, but I think the Cardinals, to be able to get to a point where their roster fits together, everybody kind of has a role and knows it, I think that could be to the team's benefit for next year. But to this point, we just haven't seen a lot of change in terms of progress toward that, which means a lot of work for Chaim Bloom this coming offseason to decide, okay, here are the forks in the road, pick a lane, and can you execute that in just one offseason could be also a difficult question.
And I want to stick with that point, but after we touch on this, nothing beats relaxing on a hot summer day and watching baseball. And the simplest way to get in on the action is to download the Pick Six app from DraftKings. It's crazy simple. Just pick more or less on the stats for 2 or more of your favorite players, and boom, you're in the mix for big cash prizes. Pick Six is available right here in Missouri. Don't miss out on all the fun. Don't settle for a smaller payout. Switch to Pick Six, and right now, new customers can get $25 in bonus picks with their first deposit of $5. Download the DraftKings Pick Six app now and use code STL Sports. That's code STL Sports for new customers to get $25 in bonus picks with their first deposit of $5. Better payouts, bigger wins, only with Pick Six from DraftKings. The crown is yours.
Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Help is available for problem gambling. Call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org in Connecticut. Must be 18 and over. Age and eligibility restrictions vary by jurisdiction. Pick Six not available everywhere, including New York and Ontario. Void where prohibited. 1 per new customer. Bonus awarded as non-withdrawable Pick Six credits that expire in 14 days. Limited time offer. See terms at picksix.draftkings.com/promos.
Welcome back to Card Central Postgame Show on STL Sports Central. Brenden, Schaeffer, Stefan, Caray here. And you mentioned Chaim Bloom. And I don't know if we've really touched on Chaim and what maybe he will be doing during the offseason. Again, it's hard to speculate because he's had success in the Red Sox organization. He's been a really good developer of talent, especially with teams that are trying to cut payroll and develop through their farm system. One of the things that happens when new general managers or presidents of baseball operations come in is they don't necessarily have the same level of loyalty to certain players as the previous regime would. Not that there's anybody that, say, Chaim doesn't like or does like, but there's that sort of feeling of, okay, I don't have to necessarily hold on to certain players that maybe Mozeliak wanted to hold on to. And that opens up infinite possibilities for who could be in a Cardinals uniform next year and the year after that and the year after that. I'm just really curious as to how he's going to assess this roster and figure out who is essential moving forward.
And I think that can be part of the benefit. I don't want to assign credit to something that he hasn't done yet, but I think that can be part of the benefit to Chaim Bloom not being installed as the Pobo right away. He has been around this organization, basically auditing it for a year and then beginning phase one of his install to revamp the development system. They allowed him to hire a few different key pieces to undertake everything that was going on throughout the system. And now I think as he shifts into the role full time of Pobo, you start to get a real feel for the major league roster and who has value that you want to keep because they're a good player, who's a pretty good player, but one that may have more value to you as a trade chip because of some of the other things that you're looking to accomplish as an organization. I feel as though, Stefan, he has had now adequate time to survey the land while still being kind of at arm's reach, right? We don't really hear from Chaim Bloom. We're not sure the extent of his day-to-day. We kind of have an idea of what he is doing for the organization, prepping for the undertaking before him. But I would like to believe that allows him, this time that he's had to audit, survey, and then jump into the seat, to hopefully hit the ground running with some of the key but difficult decisions that will need to be made. You mentioned it. He doesn't have the same ties as he might had he drafted these players and developed them all from the ground up. But he's been around for a couple of years, hopefully is able to look at it through an analytical lens. They kind of need that business-like approach to it rather than, and this isn't a knock necessarily, but it's just inevitable for Mozeliak to know, here are the visions our staff and our group had for these players. Here's what we thought could play out with them. Now we're stuck with, we've seen glimpses, but they haven't come all the way through to the other side of that. Which guys do we lean into and which guys do we have to move on from? It might be easier for an outsider, per se, to have that conversation and then execute that plan than it ever would have been for Mozeliak to do it himself.
And if you look around the league, the two best teams in the league right now in terms of record, you could say the Brewers and the Tigers in the National League and the American League, neither of which are spending a ton of money on their rosters. It can be done if you develop well. And I think that's going to be how the Cardinals have to win games. They don't have Albert anymore. They don't have Yadier Molina. They do not have Carpenter. They don't have Wainwright. I mean, there are a lot of players that certainly have gone in the door and gone out the door through their careers in St. Louis. But because of that, it's encouraging that you can win in this division by good roster construction without having to break the bank.
Yeah, and the Brewers are absolutely the model organization right now in Major League Baseball. It was mentioned here, the Cleveland Tampa Bay model. Like, I think whoever you want to attribute the model to, the Brewers have absolutely perfected it here in 2025 with the way they churn the relief pitchers. They have a bunch of them who can contribute. They are getting consistent starting pitching, whether it's a guy they pick up off the free agent scrap heap like a Jose Quintana, whether it's another guy that they develop like a Miz, like a Quinn Priester. Like, they do such an excellent job. And that's not even to mention what they've done offensively. They'll trade Aaron Savali for a guy with OPS of 550, and he'll turn into Babe Ruth when you trade for him. I don't know how they continue to do it, but their hit rate is absolutely astounding at this point, Steph. And you just have to look back and marvel at it. You say, I don't know how they're doing it, but if the other teams in the league, and namely the Cardinals, can figure that out and try to replicate, more power to them, because I think it can be a very successful model when done like they're doing it up there in Milwaukee.
Yeah, and the new head of player development, as Aaron so aptly put, the Cleveland Tampa Bay model, Rob Cerfolio, comes to us from Cleveland. So there's certainly a direction that has been shown, not just by the players that they're putting out on the field, by the changes that have been made organizationally, but with the staff that was implemented in the offseason. So it's good to see, if you can't beat them, join them. And that might be how the Cardinals have to win moving forward. And I don't care how they win as long as they win. I think there are so many people that would agree with that point. Sweep on the line tomorrow. They get a big opportunity. What are you looking for out of this one?
I'm looking for the Cardinals to get to Sandy Alcantara. He's scheduled tomorrow to go for the Fish, and his ERA is over 6. That's not what we're used to seeing from Sandy Alcantara in the way that I know Cardinals fans picture him in their minds. Cardinals have faced him before this season and probably let him off the hook a little bit compared to, what the rest of the league is doing to him. So I would say there's no days off. Let this be another touchdown that goes on the board for the offense to say it was a really successful day and week in Miami. And then, you go on to Steinbrenner Field and try to carry it on against the Rays in that other Florida series. But I want to see, for me, it's more about the offense. Yeah, we want to see what Palante looks like. It's been up and down and more down than up recently for him. But I certainly would like to see offensively what the Cardinals are able to do there, Stefan. And if I may, a couple things from the chat that I'd like to highlight. We're getting some speculation on J.J. Weatherholt because he didn't start tonight in Memphis. He has basically every Thursday off, from what I understand it, down there in AAA. And so it is maybe a little bit peculiar for him to be off on a Tuesday. I have not seen anything out there, though, Stefan, that would explain, an absence from the minor league lineup. Maybe at this point in the season, you're getting late in the year, and it is his first full professional season. We have to remember he was drafted last year in the middle of the summer. And so if this is a spot where they say, hey, we're going to grab you 2 days off in a row because we're getting late in the year and we want to keep you fresh and whatever the case may be, wouldn't shock me. If he's on the way to Florida, wouldn't shock, whatever the Cardinals want to do there. But as far as speculating, I don't believe we've really got a lot to add to that conversation other than look forward to seeing him when we see him, because obviously he's an exciting young player.
I agree with that point too. And being in the minor leagues the last few years, they move guys around for a myriad of reasons. And some of them are puzzling. Some of them make you scratch your head, but they know what's going on better than any of us, the inner workings of the organization. And JJ has so much riding on his success. He needs to be a great player for this organization, or else some things are going to have to change quicker than maybe some have anticipated. So as much as they need to rest him, as long as he keeps playing the way that he's playing, I think all of us are fine with it. Now, Brenden, I will be at Steinbrenner Field on Thursday. I'll be there Friday. Nice. So one of the things about that ballpark, it is very hitter friendly. And if the bats keep going the way that they're going, we're going to see some balls flying out of the yard. I don't know. Is Sonny slated to pitch in that?
I think he would be. I think Michaelis and Sonny, because we haven't seen them, right? Not since the weekend, if I'm doing this off the top of the dome, but I think that's right. So it'll be interesting to see, but that's true of both sides, right? When you're playing in that environment, the good news is both teams play in the same rule set. So, what's good for the goose will be good for the gander. We'll see if the Cardinals are able to continue hitting the way they're doing right now in Miami, but also what the challenge will be pitching wise, whoever's on the mound, because nobody's going 9 innings.
Well, the Cardinals win tonight 7-4. They've scored 15 runs the first 2 games of the series. Brenden, you have any final thoughts about tonight's game?
I got one, not about tonight's game, but this comment from Aaron that I do think it's important to address, because I know that it's been kind of thrown out there, and the way that it's been thrown out there about the draft has been, obviously wrong. But I've heard it said, people talk about the Cardinals can't draft in the top 10, which is never what it was. Whenever I've talked about this topic, and Derek Gould recently did some great reporting to clear this up for people, I've talked about it as I didn't know whether the Cardinals were eligible for lottery this year or not, because it's to do with whether or not they're paying into the rev share system or they're receiving from it. And according to the reporting I saw from Derek Gould of the Post-Dispatch, that switched just on a dime this year. Because it's not just based on market size, it's based on revenues. And so the Cardinals' status was kind of right there in the middle. And I kept saying, I don't know the answer, but I know that it's not top 10. It would never be about that. It would be lottery, which is top 6. The Cardinals were eligible for lottery the year they got Weatherholt, but they didn't get picked in the lottery. That's why they went and dropped a couple of spots. Worked out really well that they got him, but that was drafting 7th. This year, they were in the lottery despite an 83-win season a year ago. That's the Liam Doyle pick. But because of where the Cardinals are in rev share, this is all per Derek Gould, they would be eligible for lottery once again, but there's no guarantee of getting picked, obviously, for that. And then if they were to get selected for a second time, they would then not be eligible for the 3rd year, if I'm understanding this correctly. So I know that it's been talked about in ways that were vague, nobody really knew, or people confidently were wrong. Credit to Derek Gould. The Cardinals can still get a high pick in this next draft. But what I would say to that is, no, to me, that doesn't mean the tank is on, because internally they knew all along what that was going to be, I'm sure. Us finding out publicly through, finally somebody did some reporting on what it legitimately is, that doesn't change what they've been approaching the entire season. And literally they just got the 5th pick with 83 wins. So you're going to play this straight up is my take on that, just to make sure that we have addressed this as a topic because I've been on shows where people have talked about it and I stay kind of quiet because I'm like, I don't know if that's right, but I don't know that it's wrong. I'll trust Eric Gould's reporting that they're going to be eligible for that lottery, but it's a lottery. It's no guarantee. Do you want to try to catch up to the teams that are going to already be on pace to lose 90, 95, 100 games? Be my guest. A, it doesn't guarantee you anything. And B, I just don't think they're even close enough to being bad enough for that to matter. So that's I had to do a quick rant on that, Stefan, before we got out of here in light of the recent reporting from STL today, Derek Gould.
Yeah, certainly. And I think my opinion on this is that I'd rather have the young guys that you're planning on building around on the Major League roster right now learning how to win rather than forcing them to lose. So that's pretty much all we've got here on the Card Central postgame show presented by DraftKings. This is STL Sports Central's coverage of Cardinals baseball. For Brenden Schaeffer, I'm Stefan Caray signing off. The Cardinals win the series against the Marlins. Look for the sweep tomorrow afternoon.